the OCR just rose a whopping 0.75%. This is by far the biggest jump we have seen from the Reserve Bank in the last 24 months. Will interest rate continue to rise, and when is it going to stop? Is there a possibility that interest rate will go up to 10%? What's going on, everybody? It's Blandon here from mortgagehq. This is part 2 of the 7 tips and strategies on how you can take back control over your cash flow in this rising interest rate environment. In part 1, we cover 4 tips. You can check that out in the link in the description below. In this video, we're going to explore 3 more concepts that are less conventional. But before we dive in, we are going to recap on why interest rate could potentially continue to rise. Now, interest rate is actually a tool of the RBNZ, or the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. They use this tool to adjust the inflation rate that we see. When interest rate is lower, obviously it will encourage people to spend more money, make more asset acquisitions, and in effect, that's going to increase inflation rate. On the contrary, if interest rate were to rise, people will then spend less and look to save more money in the bank. Along with this tool, they can also look to print money. By increasing the money supply is going to also increase the demand for goods and services, and therefore also contributing to inflation. More money in the economy also means that it's easier to borrow money. So then how do they know when to put up the interest rates? There are 2 major indicators that the Reserve Bank basically will follow. The first is inflation. This is to do with the price of goods and services. You could also look up CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index. The second indicator is employment rate. How much of the workforce is being utilized right now? So where are we at the moment? Prices are at their all-time high. We have not seen inflation at this level before. And when demand is strong, it will also result in a shortage for labor. So until inflation calms down and unemployment rate goes up, it might be a little while before we see the Reserve Bank lower the interest rates. Now, there's also an argument that interest rate might have to come down sooner rather than later because the property market have already slowed down significantly. Household expenses are spiking up because the repayments on these mortgages are horrendous. And with some of the budgeting that we're seeing with a lot of the clients, where they go from interest rates of 2 and 3% to a 6 to 7%, I can see the potential for a lot more properties coming onto the market in the next 12 months, where these investors or property owners have to sell their property so that they could ease up on their repayments. So what could you be doing right now to increase your cash flow position for the coming future? The first strategy is to trade your yield. Simply put, sell a property that have low rental income for another one of the same value with much higher rental income. If you have a property that is generating just one income source, you could look to swap for something that has 3 or 4 income sources. You can do this if you were to trade from one city to another where the prices are a lot lower. Now, what is yield? Yield is simply your rent times 52, which is your annual rent, divided by the value of the property. So if you're receiving $26,000 in rent, which is around $500 a week, and you got a $650,000 property, this is called a 4% yield. 4% rent on a 6% interest rate, you can quickly figure out that the rent is not going to cover the mortgage repayments, and you probably have to pay for rates and insurance, so it's not a good position to be in. In another video that I put in the description, you'll be able to see other properties that I've shown in the channel that are yielding around 9, 10, 11% in this current environment. The second strategy is to cash flow hack your property. One thing people often get stuck with decision making on is whether or not to renovate their property for a better cash flow. Now, a simple way to determine this is to make sure you get around 10% return on your money. To simplify, let's call it the 10% rule. Here's a quick math formula to work this out. If you spend $100,000 on a property for renovations, you can take off the 3 zeros at the end and double that $100 figure to get $200. This would equate to around 10% return. And that's probably what you want to increase your weekly cash flow by before making that renovations decision. So $100,000 would want to result in around $200 in rent. So likewise, if you're spending $50,000, you take off the 3 zeros, double that is $100 per week. $50,000 of renovations, you want $100 per week. And likewise, $25,000 of renovations, you want $50 per week as a minimum. So how can you achieve this kind of return? Well, you can add an extra bedroom, you could do up the kitchen and the bathroom, you could get new paint job and electrical work. Those are all obvious renovations moves that you can make. But what's really going to make a big difference in this current market is adding a tiny home or a sleep out, because you're likely to get around 15% return or more on your money. An even better cash flow hack that you can add to your property is actually renting it out to a social housing provider. This is going to save you around 20 to 30% tax on the rent that you're receiving. So it's slightly different from getting more cash flow, but what it's going to allow you to do is save you more money. The third strategy is to introduce capital partners. Some of you might be thinking, well, I don't really want to sell my property, I can still sustain it, but I would appreciate some cash flow. Why not consider cutting someone in onto your property deal that you can trust? A good example of this is a client with several properties of mine that is wanting to help their son and daughters into properties as well. Now, with the interest rate rising and the tax rules phasing out, he would actually appreciate a bit more money sitting in the bank. And it would be a pity to sell now because he can't really borrow more money. So what we did instead for this client is to take one of the properties out of the portfolio, isolate it, and sell part of that property to his son. This way, the son can go to the bank and get a new mortgage on this property. And with that new mortgage, he could pay the parents. Now the parents have a bit more sitting in the bank, and now the son gets into property much earlier without having to pay market price. This is a win-win scenario. Now, of course, it's not going to be limited to just your family. Let's just say you have a property that you can develop, and because right now interest rate is rising and then the construction cost is high as well, you might not be in a position to actually do the development right now. So perhaps cutting a business partner into this property where they can buy in at slightly lower than market price, and they can provide the additional capital required so that you can do the development now and still make a profit or generate the rental income, then that's one way you could do it. By introducing capital partners, you are able to reduce your risk position and also create win-win solutions where both parties can benefit. So there you have it, folks. Those are the 3 tips and strategies that you can implement right now to increase your cash flow position. And if you have found value, do not forget to smash the like button for the YouTube algorithm. We would really appreciate that. And of course, your feedback is important. If you leave a comment on any other strategies that I've missed out, we would love to see that as well. In summary, the first strategy is you can replace the lower cash flow properties with something that has significantly higher cash flow, like a multi-unit. You especially want to cycle out some properties where the bright line test is gone and also there's not much development potential or renovations potential on that particular property. The second is that you can cash flow hack your properties. The obvious thing to do is just to renovate, add bedrooms, do some bathroom and kitchen renovations. But the better thing to do right now is to add sleep outs in tiny homes and also try to look for social housing contracts. Lastly, don't be afraid to introduce capital partners. You don't always have to make all the money. You could find win-win solutions where it benefits both parties and you will be able to win more together. Bye for now, and I'll see you guys in the next video.